Hi traders, welcome in my weekly outlook for next week's trading session. We'll go over the dollar pairs. I do not believe that the cycle of dollar weakness is over altogether. However, I expect a pause in dollar weakness for next week's trading sessions before we can weaken even further. I will also have a look at silver and gold as well as Bitcoin for next week's trading session. Let's start with the dollar index. As discussed many times, because it's a weekly time frame, this is one unique wave, and I don't think it's over. I think we can easily go a little lower to 87.50 area, and then start a significant correction, which will correct this entire move lower from the 103, 104 highs. Alright, if we zoom in on the lower time frames, 4 hour for example, and here we go. I expect something like a B, C to say the least, but the thing is, it can turn very sideways. Because what I always like to see is a reversal sign by means of a minimum requirements for a bullish impulse. Well, we don't see such a thing yet. Which means on the 1 hour and 4 hour time frame, I don't have a reversal sign. I understand that this is a bullish move, but I will go over the dollar CAD, for example, what we told you last week. They're very comparable, but that doesn't mean it's the start of reversal, because if it's not the minimum requirements for a reversal sign, you very often see either a sideways correction you don't want to be stuck in, or you see a continuation lower before the reversal starts. So what does that mean? If you want to trade the continuation of this bullish move in the dollar index, you have to take it from the 15-minute time frame, because this is a 15-minute move by means of potential impulse. That means if you see in the beginning of the week this consolidation come to an end, you can buy the dollar index for a third leg higher. The minimum target will be this high, and there's no point in keeping your stop anywhere further than the low of the correction. But in any case, if the dollar index starts weakening in the beginning of the week, you don't want to miss the reversal, because the reversal has to be some kind of significant, and that can be in time of course, but most likely it will start retracing some price action, which means you're going to retrace on the 4 hour time frame, and that's still a significant move. And then I expect a week later that we're going to push lower, and then the end of February we most likely start a correction of this entire cycle. But we take it step by step, and I will update it every week. The euro dollar of course is basically the inverse. Same thing here. This is one unique wave higher on the weekly time frame, and it starts to make a perfect cycle. And I don't think that's over yet. I'm looking for 126 to say the least, maybe even higher. For now, I expect a correction of at least this move here. And keep in mind, 2 weeks ago, as we were looking at this here, and I said the upside is limited. We could execute one short, another short here, and then price trailed higher. And that was on a Thursday, I believe, and I said, well, it's not ready yet to go high this week. So that means I call it an X just in case we're going to make a wave lower. And I said, but we have the minimum requirements, so as of next week you can start looking for buys. Well, that buy of this week was tremendous. We had this minor impulse, minimum requirements, so I can take out the X. And since price didn't move any higher the rest of the week, we had this beginning of last week, which was a perfect consolidation and a continuation high. Well, what's going on for next week? The upside is limited, and when I say limited, it's the same as dollar index, but then the inverse. If we take out this high, definitely look for sells during the week, because we need to correct, and then we most likely continue higher before we correct the entire cycle. Alright, this itself, and of course very comparable, is a corrective wave lower. And it's not an impulse, and the bearish impulse on the 1 hour time frame. It's a 15-minute cycle, and that tells us already that we most likely gonna see a correction for next week, but not the major correction. It can turn into that of course, but that's not what I go for, because right now I have no indication that the entire cycle is over. On the contrary, I think the cycle is not over yet, which means you're gonna look for this corrective move lower to see a continuation. Keep in mind that this is also a corrective wave. And if we continue higher for some reason, this most likely is one of the examples where you see an expanding corrective structure. Let's say you're going to see something like this. And then you still want to go for that move lower. And whether that's going to take out this low, yes or no, has yet to be determined. If we don't take out the high, I'm already in the short. If we don't take out the high, I want to at least see this low be taken out. And then only if next week's trading session is confirming this impulse to be over, then I will start looking for potential bullish continuations the week after. And once that out of the way, we start correcting the entire move higher on the euro, which means we start making a significant correction that's going to correct the move from the 103 lows all the way up to the 126. And that will be a tremendous sell. And that itself will not change anything of the bigger picture, but the market moves in cycles, and this cycle is coming to an end. But I don't think it's comes to an end yet. But I do believe, and everything points that direction, that we need to start making some correction. And let's hope it's in price. That means we have an easy sell for next week. If it's by means of time, well, then we have a little harder week in terms of shorting it. That must be done on lower time frames. But that makes it easier to buy it the week after. It's just the way the market works, and there's no point in calling patterns right now, because there's several scenarios possible, because we're really looking for corrective structures of probably only for a week. Pound dollar, I slightly adjusted my my view on this. Well, I had to. The market changed. We had all the good buy setups, but for next week the pound dollar has to take a pause. And it will, most likely. I see that as the most likely scenario. Well, I drew the Fibonacci ratio already. This is the move I want to see correct. We already came back to the 23.6. This is a corrective wave lower as well. And let's see whether we can make this move lower. Let's say we're going to test the 140 again before we can continue higher for the week after. And that might end the entire cycle on the pound dollar as well. What does that mean? Well, right now, this is not a bearish impulse by means of the minimum requirements on the 1 hour time frame. So once again, this is a 15-minute time frame move. You have to be aware of that, because if this turns out to be a correction like this, that can take the entire week. It will not go lower anymore, but it will confirm this move high to be over, which is drawn by means of the Fibonacci. It will also result in a minimum requirements for potential buy for the week after. So don't just jump in. Look for a setup, and keep in mind that the upside is very, very limited. So the easiest thing for next week will be, same as euro dollar, if we extend higher, definitely look for the corrective move. Other than that, take it on the 15 on the 1 hour time frame. I personally like this a little bit to trill higher to give me some kind of a more ideal setup to trade the continuation low of this move. Other than that, I just stay aside, because the dollar is the leading pair right now. So you can just pick the best pair in terms of the best setup. There's no point in trading at all. And there's no point in fighting it, because it's going to be a corrective week. And we have a lot of corrective structures still on the table. So don't overtrade. Just take it step by step, and focus on the continuation when next week's corrective is out of the way, because like I said in the previous video, that buy will be way easier because it's aligning with the trend. It will accelerate higher, and it has many of way less overlaps. But this will correct next week, and we just have to wait and see whether it's going to be by means of price, time, or a hybrid form. Dollar yen. Alright, this yellow box is what I drew, I believe, last week or 2 weeks ago. I said we were not looking for buys here. This yellow box in the middle was a three-wave pattern like we saw on the left. And it's a strong move, but a strong move itself doesn't mean anything. And well, not according to my trading. And if you go back to my videos of the dollar yen, ever since the start of this move, we said this is not the start of the continuation high, which means it's not the start of the continuation high of the yellow box on the left-hand side. I mean, I understand if you anticipate that, but it's simply not how the market works. This was not the setup for that move. So we called for the short here, and then when this happened, I said the same thing over again. I said this is not the start, we need a corrective structure. Well, there were several scenarios, and this is what my trading style is. Back here, I can come up with 3 scenarios. I gave it in the video. There are two corrective structures, bearish and a bullish scenario. And I gave the hints what to look for. Well, that was a clear sell setup. And if you start selling this pair and anticipate all kind of patterns, although there are still many on the table, perfectly valid, not invalidating any rules, not invalidating any statistics, there is no point in getting biased by patterns. You just want to trade what you see and you anticipate to the market. This move lower was a perfect sell. Pardon me. And I already said this move higher was a potential reversal with a 3-wave pattern, so it most likely only will be a wave C higher. But I also said that, and I referred to the shutdown in the US markets, that this move lower was far from ideal, and this candle higher was nothing for me. So, in other words, I said you have to wait and see what the response is, because you don't want to start buying the dollar yen, because this can very well turn into a more complex correction. Well, and what happened, and that's why I always look for minimum requirements and take it step by step, because if I'm looking for buys, I most likely not just end up with a losing trade, I also miss out on the real opportunity, and I might have closed my short way before the move ended. This was a perfect corrective structure and a continuation lower. This is another example. Because it's a strong move doesn't mean anything. We were in an extreme sell-off, which means profit taken tends to be extreme in terms of an extreme response. And then we just continue lower. Well, right now, I want to point out one thing. First of all, the dollar is overall very oversold at the moment. It needs a pause. But if we go to the daily time frame, I want to point out this here. Let me zoom in a little bit. I think I have to look at it for the 4-hour time frame. Yeah, here. We still have a gap here in the dollar yen. So I expect the dollar yen to have a little bit of more downside pressure, and the question is if this extends lower. The question is when are we going to close this gap? It can be the case next week by means of an extension lower. That will be perfect, because that means we close this gap, and Forex tends to close gaps because of the QE programs. Gaps are not closed that quickly anymore as back in the days, like 10 years ago. They tend to be closed within 24 hours or 48 hours because of the QE programs. That structures are still, cycles are still the same, but structures are a little bit reshaped. And now we just have to wait and see whether this is gonna extend a little lower, and then we see the reversal, or, and that might even be better, we see a correction next week, not closing that bearish gap, and then the week after we can sell high probability and with everything in line. So for now, take it step by step. Keep in mind that you have to deal with that gap on the dollar yen. We're very close, and it most likely is going to be closed. Other than that, I don't see a reversal sign yet. Not on the 1 hour. We start seeing some divergence here, and if you look at the indicators, but if the divergence is a hint, it's not a sign, or it's not a confirmation at all. This move high is nothing so far. So let's see what's going to happen here. I like to stay aside for now. I mean, you can manage the shorts, of course. That's what I like to do, but I don't really look to buy the dollar yen yet. I just simply see more potential in the euro and the pound, for that matter. Dollar CAD. Well, this is, I guess, the clear example I referred to in the dollar index. Unfortunately, last week I had some technical issues, and I didn't have time to try it for the third time to record the video. Sorry for that, but I hope at least you got to take away that this wasn't a bullish impulse, and that I said this doesn't look right for a buy continuation, because once again, if the start is not ideal, I can start assuming all kind of patterns, and that's nothing wrong with that, but it's just your probability will never be higher than 70%. Doesn't matter how good of pattern trader you are. I have never seen anyone able to do so. Well, what I like to do is to trade at least 90% and optimize my risk reward, therefore even more. So if something is not good enough, I don't gonna waste my time and struggle with a pair. I'd rather just let it tell me what is gonna happen. And when I was looking at this with all the traders during the week for potential buy, I said, don't buy this anymore. This is gonna be a downside price action. We're gonna sell the dollar CAD, so just look for sells. And that's something I want to emphasize. A strong move is nothing but a strong move. It doesn't mean anything. It's about whether it follows minimum requirements, and whether the corrective structure that follows a strong move is also meeting the minimum requirements. Well, this is a good example of a perfect corrective structure where wave C, or whatever you want to count it, doesn't take out the high of the first leg. And I'm not saying that will never happen, but once again, if you want to trade with the 90% probability like I do, then you have to, be a little bit more conservative and a little bit more disciplined in trading or buying. Well, for now, the dollar CAD, of course, keep making lower lows, and the same thing as all the other dollar pairs. It's really ranging. It's not as extreme in the euro and the pound, which gives the euro and the pound that little advantage for next week, because the statistics are just better for the euro and the pound for next week. But if we focus on, for example, the 1 hour time frame, right now I have no bullish impulse neither, which means I have no 1 hour time frame reversal sign. That means if you want to start buying the dollar CAD, that's fine if you want to look for continuation of this move, for example, but you're most likely gonna look for that on the 50-minute time frame, which means you need to manage it on the 50-minute time frame. Here, this one. Let me zoom out a little bit. If you want to look for something like this, perfect. You can. There's a case for that, and it actually looks good. But keep in mind, you want to manage it on the 50-minute time frame. Also, keep in mind that there might be some kind of a messy move, so you have to buy and hold for a while. Once we take out the high, bring it at least to break even. If you see this going really sideways, well, just keep in mind what we saw here on the left hand side. This corrective structure can easily happen here as well, and then of lesser degree. So therefore, I would say pick the best dollar pair and don't trade them all. And don't fight the market, because there is some comparison in this yellow box towards this one here on the 1 hour. It's not saying that that's going to happen, but it's a warning you should not ignore. So once again, this move high is a 50-minute fractal and not a 1 hour fractal. So manage it and trade on the 50-minute. And if we break lower, then the process starts all over again, and then we're most likely going to see reversal based on the 1 hour time frame. Dollar Swiss. Oh, that was not the point, showing the analysis. Well, you got it anyway. We said this has a minimum requirement of bullish impulse, but it's a three-wave pattern. So there's no reason to assume that it has to take out the high. We were looking for sells within this structure. You can go back to previous videos. And once again, if you just manage your position by means of a structured trade plan, you will end up letting your profits run and cutting your losses short, at least if your trade plan makes sense. Well, once again, we didn't see any indication here to start buying. I think I said the same thing. I said here, look at this, and that was last week. I said that this most likely can do the same thing. Here, once again, it's not a reversal sign. So if you start buying the dollar or start closing your shorts, well, you end up cutting your profits short, or actually start losing where you were actually in a perfect trade, because the entries were up here. And this was nothing but some kind of a complex, messy correction. And I like to sit through those things and just keep an eye on the bigger picture. And since there was a scenario for bullish and bearish movement, price action, there's no reason to bias myself by expectation that we have to take that out that high, because it had a minimum requirements in terms of the move, but the inner structure was not perfect, not at all. And also, I was looking for the Euro Swiss to sell off. I shared that on my Facebook page prior to, I believe 2 weeks ago. So everything combined doesn't really make sense. That was a first warning, and that's why I already mentioned, be careful. Don't assume too soon that this is reversing, because something is now right here. And well, it turned out that we have a different pattern, and now I believe that we're gonna go, well, let me go to the high time frames. I think we're gonna go to the 91, but not in a straight line, same as euro dollar. I expect, sorry, 4 hour, maybe 1 hour is better. I expect this to correct next week, and then we have the minimum requirements to start selling again, and that will most likely bring price to the 91 area. One thing I want to point out is that this move, once again, is not a bullish impulse when we use the minimum requirements. It's a clear 2-year structure, by the way, but also not on the 50 minutes. So just keep that in mind. There's perfect case to make, to say, well, you see 1 to 3 higher, but you say, well, this is a corrective structure, so I'm gonna buy it. Well, there's nothing against that. It's not the most perfect setup, but you can't have it all, I guess. But it can become perfect for those who really want to wait for the perfect setups, is if we take out this high and then reverse. So just keep that in mind. New Zealand dollar, Aussie dollar, slightly different. Oh, this was my projection of last week. We have less extreme ranges in the moves in the New Zealand and the Aussie, which means that there is a high potential for a continuation, but I don't think that will be that strong yet. It's about, of course, you just trade what you see, but the New Zealand dollar is on the daily not much changed. It's still a 3-wave pattern so far. The yellow box was 1 and now we're making a 3. I think we're going to correct this a little more maybe and then make a 5 higher, or we just push higher, correct, and then push higher. So sorry, let me draw that. Maybe something like this. But that's just a scenario. So let's see what the charts tell us. If we zoom out and you focus on this most recent unique wave, because this trend line is one unique wave, one fractal. I only draw trend lines based on one fractal. If you mix up the fractals, the trend line has little or no value. And now it gives some confirmation whether the fractal is over. It doesn't mean we're going to move low altogether. It just tells us that this move is over. So if you want to buy, you're going to buy the continuation. Well, that's not one of my rules, but it's a way to visualize it. And in this case, it's far from ideal. So what's going to happen is, if we go to the 1 hour, we have a clear 1, 2, 3 pattern lower. You can say this is over, we look for a buy. You can do that. Then you want to look for continuation of this move, but keep in mind that that move might simply make a move like this, and then we continue lower by correction, and we confirm that this move is over here. So that's why I said New Zealand dollar is a little different than the other majors, but you can definitely trade it. It's clearly in a corrective structure. We just have to determine whether that's over, yes or no. And right now, on the 15-minute time frame, we have no bullish reversal sign, and on the 1 hour we don't have it neither, which start to suggest that this is just going to correct a little lower, a little longer, confirm that this move is over, and then like the other dollar pairs, we can start looking for buys in 2 weeks. Get this here. This move is not a reversal sign yet. It can definitely turn into something, but I gave you a lot of examples that I like to see minimum requirements. And I showed you why, because everything else just kept dropping. 50-minute time frame, same here. Also, I see this as a clear 3-year structure. So I think what I will be looking for if I want to trade the New Zealand dollar, see whether we get a continuation of this, make a move like this, for example. Let me go to the 1 hour back, and then maybe a potential sell. But it's a little bit too soon to tell, so once again, pick the best dollar pair or two maybe, but don't overtrade, because it's the dollar that's moving. So if you're wrong, you don't want to be wrong all across the board. And, well, never exceed your risk levels, of course. Aussie dollar, let's go have a look at the weekly. I see this as the first impulse. This is a triangle corrective structure and a continuation higher, but that was not over yet. And this yellow box here, higher, taking out the 81.10, is a continuation of this move here, and it's simply now there are several scenarios possible. We can easily correct and push another leg higher, but most likely the Aussie dollar is going to take a pause as well. It has a little bit more potential to the upside than, once again, the euro and the pound. You see it, we really ended with a strong move. So it's wait and see game right now. You don't want to buy it right now, not at all, but you don't want to sell neither, because it's not ready yet. So what I will be looking for is see what this is going to happen. What I like to see if you want to trade Aussie dollar is a push higher and then the reverse. So I think that's the best potential trade, but that's not ready yet. Other than that, well, if this turns into a bearish reversal, corrects, you can look for a sell. But right now it's really in no man's land, and I suggest if you want to buy it, wait for a significant correction. If you want to sell it, well, wait for a reversal sign. This is not enough yet, but maybe if it starts correcting sideways, but that will be a 50-minute move, and I guess you rather want to wait for the main moves on the 1 hour. So this needs just a little bit more candles before you're ready. Silver, keep in mind the correlation between the major asset classes and the dollar. This is one unique wave. That might not be over, but I think we can go a little bit higher. Then we make a significant correction, and then we all want to be in silver if you're not just in the trade, yet in the trade. Right now, if you want to trade silver, you do it on a lesser fractal, which means you want to see this correct, most likely at least the 1 hour time frame, and then push higher. But I think this might easily correct the rest of the week, and then even in 2 weeks it might make that push higher. Right now, it's not interesting for me to add on to my buys. I simply wait a little bit. gold, basically the same. Also one unique wave. It's correct. They might make a push high and then make a significant correction before we continue high. Same for silver. Silver is a little better because it's cheaper, of course. Alright, then Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin didn't participate in the action anymore. This is fine. We have seen a lot of action in Bitcoin last year. And we finally see some significant corrections right now. We are correcting this move higher by means of the Fibonacci ratio. I showed it, this one here. And same as for many other pairs I called prior in last week, there's no reason for me to call any patterns here. Because there are simply so many structures possible right now. I can draw a trend line and say, well, if we break, we make a new high. That's 50-50. Simple like that. So, what do you need to do? You have to look at the lower time frames and analyze the inner patterns and then just manage it. The minimum requirements for correction of this move has been met, but not the ideal requirements. And I think Bitcoin might actually start setting up a really significant correction, and the market is really going to test what it is, how it can rely on it, and what to do with it in the future. Because you can come up with all fundamental analysis about cryptocurrencies, but the thing is, people simply don't know. Central banks can step in with their own cryptos. It's like it doesn't make sense to come up with a high probability fundamental analysis. And then if you do that, where do you set your invalidation levels? And we look at something that has a value of 10,800, etc. I only trade futures because I like a high liquid market. I want to have instant execution. I don't want to be stuck with expensive transaction costs and unprofessional brokers that are new to the market, are unregulated. So for me, I'm not anti-blockchain, I'm not at all. I think it's had tremendous potential and it will be the future. But the question is, like in the online bubble that created, a lot of things will disappear, some will continue, it will reshape itself, and there's simply no reason to start coming up with all kind of analysis. So let's trade what we see. We have been very successful fighting the major trend because we knew it was coming to an end. And one thing I'm pretty accurate in is calling the end of a trend way before the confirmation happened. And of course that's what you want to do, because if you call the end of a trend after confirmation, a lot of distance is already covered, and that's not what real money is. So focusing on Bitcoin, let's see. I think the 4 hours is the easiest to go over it. The corrective move lower, corrective move here, and now the continuation. Alright, then as said, this move high is not the minimum requirements of bullish impulse, which means the high probability buy is not there yet. Then we saw this move lower, which is also corrective. That's a good sign for those who want to buy it. But then we see this move higher is also corrective. That is not a good sign. And keep in mind what I said, if the minimum requirements have not been met, you have to be careful, because you don't want to be stuck in a sideways correction that's never going to move in your profit. And then it's completed, and then drops, and you are underwater from the beginning. So I could have said by this move higher, well, we're going to make a structure like this, and that is perfectly valid, but it's not never better than 70%, which is not good enough for me. But I can only share what I do and how I look at the market. I'm not saying anyone else is wrong. I'm not fighting anyone else. But there's no point for me to start talking about something I don't do myself. Because I got my reasons not to do so. So, for those who want to buy Bitcoin right now, you want to see a structure like this. From here. So 1, 2, 3. And then potential buy. That buy will be the continuation of this move here. Alright, let me draw it in. And then take it from there. Very likely that we're going to do something like this, and then here we're going to neutralize it again and see what's going on. But keep in mind, if this is not the minimum requirements, and this drops, we're very close to this low. Ideally, we take out this low and start over again, and then this move gives us the minimum requirements. What you do then is very easy, very relaxing, very high probability, and the wave least resistance. You let that consolidate and you buy it. And that's the buy you want to be in. We manage it, we will see whether we go for these highs or take out the high altogether, or whether we're going to do something like this and continue lower again, and just it turns into one gigantic corrective structure. So calling patterns right now doesn't really make sense. We just take it step by step. If you want to buy Bitcoin without one of these two setups, of course, it's perfectly valid because you can have a different corrector structure. This can be a contracting pattern, and you can still have this buy. You can execute it, but you just have a little less probability, which is fine. And based on your risk aversion, you can say less probability, I take on less risk, or you can ignore it and say I go for 70 or 60%. That's up to you. But for me, if I want to buy my Bitcoin future, I want to see at least this load taken out, and preferably this load taken out. I'm not selling now. I'm not speculating on the short anymore, because I don't have a sell setup neither. So basically, we're in no man's land right now. But it's crucial to understand the structures, then this is definitely something possible. However, if this is going to happen, then the most likely scenario is that we're going to continue lower after that. So that's how I look at Bitcoin. Once again, for buy, minimum requirements, I want to see this low taken out. For high probability buy, I want to see this low taken out. If that happens, we push higher, consolidate, then we all should be looking for buys for Bitcoin. The way of least resistance. I look at it this way, there's so many instruments out there to trade, why will I fight something that's less than ideal? Have a safe trading week, and see you next week. Bye bye.